Thank you for having me. So I should explain, I'm just a writer. I'm not an architect or an expert in city planning or everything, but I am a person who uses cities. So I figure I might have some say in what I think cities should be like. And this is called the Quantified Flaneur Humans versus the Smart City. Now, to start with, I should say that I love the idea of the smart city. It's a really cool phrase. I'd much rather live in a smart city than in a stupid city. It all sounds really nice. You read about what's going to be possible and people tell you, you're going to be able to drive into the outskirts of your city and then step right onto a train because your electric car will drive off and park itself to recharge, and then you can summon your car back at the end of the day with your phone and it'll come and meet you. Or if you have a heart attack in the street, a drone will come with a defibrillator and revive you. There'll be maintenance robots that live on top of skyscrapers and do the repairs automatically. It all sounds really cool. These things are all urban near-future science fiction, or some of them are possible right now. And they are visions that help to drive a smart city rhetoric that we've seen more and more in the last decade or so being promoted, mainly by big technology and engineering companies. Now we have ubiquitous wireless broadband and embedded computerized sensors in the urban fabric. Everything can become part of the Internet of Things. The global market for the Internet of Things, I read an estimate lately, it's $1.7 trillion. In the 1970s, we used to be promised better living through chemistry. Now it's all about better living through data. The smart city arguably began at least as long ago as the invention of automatic traffic lights. Apparently, they were first deployed in 1922 in Houston, Texas. Here are some men admiring some new traffic lights in London a few years later than that. I grew up in London, and it's changed in some wonderful ways in the time I've been living there. There's been a spate of people writing recently about how they're moving out of London because they can't stand it more because it's just for the rich. I don't feel that way. I like our new buildings. We've got the Shard. I'm quite fond of the Shard. I'm even fond of this one they call the Walkie-Talkie, which just won a prize for the worst building. It won the Carbuncle Award, awarded by some London architectural writers. I think it's quite cute because it's like a sort of cartoon, a friendly cartoon of a building. It did used to melt cars when they first put it up because the convex or concave glass would actually focus the sun's rays and start to melt cars on the road. But they fixed that. They had to put some plastic film over the whole building. But it's cool now. Anyway, London has changed, I think, in ways that benefit everyone. I mean, of course, rich people use those buildings, but you can look at them even if you're not rich. And one example that changed during my lifetime that we're all used to now, and we don't even really consider it a smart city thing, but it is, and it's train indicator boards, which the London Underground installed in 1983. Now, these ones obviously aren't very useful because instead of showing the destination, it just says check front of train, and that does happen quite a lot on the London Underground. But even so, it's nice to know you've got 5 or 6 minutes till the next train, or as we call them, 5 tube minutes, which are always mysteriously longer than actual minutes. So we don't really think of these things as smart city developments, but they are, because they enable you to get around more easily with less frustration. I remember you used to have to buy a paper ticket and show it to a human being in order to get on a train. Now we've got smart transport cards, we've got contactless bank cards, we can get around London that way. More recently, London's system of signs has improved. This is part of what people call the legible city movement. And we have these big public information boards, which they call monoliths. I was pleased to learn that the slightly smaller ones are called midi-liths, and the really small ones are called mini-liths. That's what the people who design them call them. Now, there are questions about who decides what information to put on these signs. I talked to a guy called Leo Hollis, who's an urban theorist in Britain, and he wrote this book called Cities Are Good For You. And he says he's pro the legible city because it does what it says on the tin. But there are serious problems in the decision-making behind the signs. Like all urban technologies, one has to be very cautious about who is running this and who is it aimed at. If a legible city only maps shopping malls, car parks, and the police station, this seriously reduces what the city has to offer. This can make parts of the city invisible to the visitor. Someone somewhere has made an arbitrary decision that tourists don't want to go there, or that that place is too dangerous, so it should be avoided. In any case, we might think now that train indicator boards and street signs are old hat anyway, because we've got City Mapper and we've got Google Navigation. A while ago, I actually tried the experiment. I was going to an unfamiliar pub in East London, so I got off the overground train and used the Google voice navigation on my phone and said, just direct me there. So I wasn't looking at the screen. I was listening to Queens of the Stone Age, and every now and again it would be interrupted by a woman saying, in 10 feet, turn left. And it was a weird experience because, of course, I got there fine. It took about 15 minutes. But I was just in a daze, and I wasn't really taking any notice of my surroundings. And I wouldn't be able to get there again if I tried. In fact, I went back to the same pub a couple of months later, and I had no idea how to get there, and I had to look at it on the map again. And increasingly, Google is mapping the interiors of buildings and shopping malls in this way. So if you wanted to, you could go around like that all the time, never really knowing where you're going, just being guided by the hand. But would we really want that? Of course, we're not obliged to do that. But even with looking at a map on your screen, you're outsourcing the solution. That's something that Patricia Brown, who helped to design the signs in London, said. You're outsourcing the solution if you're just letting something guide you rather than actively looking at a sign and trying to figure out your own route there. Now, there's another critique of the smart city, which is that it's basically a concept invented by business. There's this guy called Adam Greenfield at the LSE who's written this excellent book called Against the Smart City. And I'm going to quote from this. He says, the concept of the smart city originated with the giant technology companies such as IBM, Cisco, and AG, who hoped to profit from big municipal contracts. The notion of the smart city in its full contemporary form appears to have originated within these businesses rather than with any party group or individual recognized for their contributions to the theory or practice of urban planning. And there are whole new cities, like that Songdo in South Korea, have been constructed according to this template. The buildings have automatic climate control and computerized access, and its roads and water and waste and electricity systems have electronic sensors, so the city's brain can track and respond to the movement of residents. But people feel these places seem eerie and half-finished, which shouldn't be surprising because according to Anthony M. Townsend in his book, Smart Cities, Songdo was basically conceived as a weapon for fighting trade wars. The idea was to entice multinationals to set up Asian operations at Songdo with lower taxes and less regulation. And I went to a Smart City Summit in London's Docklands last year, and there were a lot of people talking about what they said, the huge opportunity you've got, expanding city budgets, offer a huge opportunity for technological solutions. Whenever you hear somebody offering solutions, you should check your wallet, of course, because people selling solutions have often just invented the problem they're selling the solution to. So you could say that this new vision of the smart city that you see here is utopian. But there's nothing wrong with utopias. If we didn't aim for utopias, we'd never improve anything. The problem, I think, with this vision is not that it's utopian, but it's disturbingly naive and unrealistic and goes against a lot of things we know quite well about the real world. The real problem is this vision of turning the city into a giant computer with all its systems networked together. Because what is one thing we know for sure about software? It crashes. I'm not the first person to use a blue screen of death today, I'm glad to see. So that's one thing we know about an operating system, it crashes. Another thing we know about computer systems is they get hacked. And you don't have to be a customer of Ashley Madison to know that. So the smart city is really going to be the hackable city. The most coherent large-scale vision of a smart city that I'm actually aware of is in a video game. This is a high-budget game that came out last year called Watch Dogs. And it's the first video game really to provide a highly explorable simulation of an urban environment that is itself, within the fiction of the game, the environment is computer controlled. So it's basically Chicago in a near future where Chicago has become a smart city. And you play this hacker who can basically hack into all the city's systems through his smartphone. And once you're hacking into the city, it goes all sort of Tron-esque Wi-Fi-esque, this kind of William Gibson vision of looking into the city's nervous system. It's beautiful. And this is what they call Chicago's operating system, CTOS. So not only the CCTV camera is in the game, but the traffic lights and the soda machines, also the road bollards, the bridges, the shipping cranes, and the L trains of this virtual Chicago, they're all computerized, which is what people say they want to happen in real cities. But because they're computerized, of course, if you can hack into them, you can take down the whole electricity grid, you can cause a complete blackout. In this game, if you're being chased by the cops, you can hack a bridge while you're driving over it so that it raises and the cop cars can't follow you. So in a way, Watch Dogs, while being this entertaining video game, is also a sort of procedural critique of modern urbanism's ideal of the smart city, in which all the infrastructure is controlled by networked information technology, because the smarter the city gets, the more vulnerable it might be to the geek with a grudge. At one point in the game, the hero infiltrates a prison in order to intimidate a witness, and he actually says he couldn't possibly have got in if the prison weren't a computerized prison. And the same goes for the entire world that's constructed in the game, and our world, if they do what they're threatening to our cities. Dan Gear is a computer security analyst, and he said about this Internet of Things stuff, especially if you're embedding it into cities, well, you know, the longer lived the devices are, the surer it will be that they'll be hijacked within their lifetime. So the smartification of the city depends on naive utopianism about perfectly written software that'll never crash and perfectly unhackable technology, the likes of which has never actually been demonstrated to exist. From another book I've read recently, Cyberphobia, by Edward Lucas, who's an editor at The Economist. He says the potential for sabotage and accident in the smart grid is huge. A device can switch off another device to save power. It could also be programmed to do so maliciously. Food would rot in fridges. Lifts and doors could stop working. Sewage pumps could switch off to prompt a catastrophic public health disaster. And there was a recent essay in Wired about how hackers can take complete control of a modern computerized car. And if you don't hack into the card systems, there was a news story earlier this week about just using $60 worth of electronics, apparently. You can spoof the laser ranging system of most modern self-driving cars by firing low-energy lasers at it. So it thinks it's surrounded by obstacles, therefore it comes to a complete stop. So you can just stop a car. And of course, we've seen the hackable sniper rifle. And what about drones? Surely people will be able to hack into drones. I personally can't wait to have the stuff I buy from Amazon delivered to the balcony of my apartment by a drone. But it would be surprising if someone didn't find a way to hack into them. If this chimpanzee can take down a drone with a stick, which is what happened in an American zoo, that's the image from the drone, as it angrily attracts the drone with a stick, I think humans could probably hack into one. And you don't even need a malevolent hacker or an angry ape for things to go wrong. If an entire city has an operating system, what happens when the operating system crashes? And if you're running an entire city on software, you're experimenting on millions of real people. So Leo Hollis says the smart city is really just the beta city. It's a kind of perpetual beta city, like so much software, it's never really finished. And you know, of course a city is never finished, but the perpetual beta city is never really operational as advertised. We can be sure in such a city that accidents will happen. Driverless cars will crash, bugs will take down whole transport subsystems or the electricity grid, drones will hit passenger aircraft. And people have been thinking about this sort of thing, of course, for long before cities became computerized. Here's a quote from Ludwig Wittgenstein. In the city, the streets are nicely laid out, and you drive on the right, and you have traffic lights, etc. There are rules. When you leave the city, there are still roads, but no traffic lights. And when you get far off, there are no roads, no lights, no rules, nothing to guide you. It's all woods. And when you return to the city, you may feel that the rules are wrong, that there should be no rules, etc. Well, of course there are rules, and the smart city will have more rules than ever in the form of the computerized algorithms that run the software. So for the sake of argument, let's just imagine that the software of the future smart city is unhackable and never just crashes. Would the software city then be perfect? Well, it depends who is writing the algorithms. And that is always going to be a business of politics. As one example, think about self-driving cars. There's a brilliant piece by Gary Marcus, who's a professor of psychology at New York University, who wrote in The New Yorker. He said, suppose you're in a self-driving car that's going across a narrow bridge, and there's a school bus full of children hurtling out of control the other way. There's no room for the vehicles to pass each other. Should the self-driving car take the decision to drive your car off the bridge and kill you in order to save the children? That is an example of a trolley problem in philosophy for fans of that side of thing. But what this example demonstrates is somebody's going to have to make a decision of that sort under certain rare circumstances. And that demonstrates that driving a car is not just a technical operation of the sort that machines can do more efficiently. Driving a car is also sometimes a moral operation. And if we let cars do the driving for us, we're going to outsource not only our motor control, but we're going to outsource our moral judgment to the people who've decided to write the algorithms in a certain way. So a lot of people say, including Evgeny Morozov and other critics, we need a new class of algorithmic auditors who are going to look into algorithms on the public's behalf to uncover the buried assumptions in all the algorithms that will be running the smart city if we let them. Because another thing we already know about algorithms is that they may function fine in theory, but when you let them loose on the real world, they can have unexpected and dire consequences. For instance, in the world of high-frequency trading, where automated computer systems buy and sell shares on the stock market very rapidly, they can lead to the price of securities fluctuating wildly, and they were blamed for the flash crash of 2010, in which the Dow Jones Index lost 9% of its value in a couple of minutes. And that was down to a rogue algo, as they call them. And in 2012, the New York Stock Exchange canceled trades in a number of stocks whose prices had exhibited some more bizarre behavior thanks to a rogue algo that was run by Knight Capital. The company lost $440 million in 45 minutes. So now there are regulatory authorities in Europe, Hong Kong, and Australia are proposing rules that you wouldn't be able to employ an algo to do automated trading in this way unless the algorithm is regularly tested and regularly open to official scrutiny. And if they're going to do that with financial markets, they should do that with smart cities too before they make this stuff happen in real life, because a flash crash on a stock market is one thing, but a flash crash in a city could be much more dangerous. Now, here's a glorious vision of the smart city from 250 years ago. I apologize for the bad quality of my scanning, but once I start reading out the description, you'll understand what's going on here. This is from a book by Bernard Harcourt called Exposed: Desire and Disobedience in the Digital Age. During the Ancien Régime, this is 1749, an eccentric French inventor by the name of Jacques-François Guillotin drew an early blueprint for a perfect surveillance state. He wanted to divide the city of Paris into 24 equal-sized neighborhoods, then subdivide those neighborhoods into districts of 20 houses, each under the supervision of a syndic, minutely alphanumerize and label each building, each entry hall, every floor, every stairwell, every door, in order to efficiently connect and organize the constant flow of information coming from police agents, spies, and informants, and place each district under the supervision of a police watchman at a console. So within that hall, there are these police watchmen sitting at a console, and each watchman has instantaneous access to all this data because these gigantic wheels are actually gigantic paper filing machines. They're 12 feet in diameter, 36 feet in circumference, and the watchman operates a pedal that rotates the wheel, and therefore he can get to any bit of the data very quickly. And each of these wheels apparently could efficiently organize 102,400 individual pieces of paper. Guillotin presented this idea to Louis XV in 1749, but sadly it was never built. 2.5 centuries later, we finally got around to building it in Rio. This is the high-tech nerve center that IBM built for Rio de Janeiro. It's the kind of 1984 style vision already alarmingly realized. As Anthony Townsend put it, this began as a tool to predict rain and manage flood response, and now it's a high-precision control panel for the entire city. He says that Rio's mayor has boasted, the operations center allows us to have people looking into every corner of the city 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Something that a French guy in Paris 250 years ago could only have dreamt of. So in this way, the smart city could be the perfect panopticon. If reliance on signs and Google navigation can make it more difficult to get lost to ourselves, at least we'll never get lost to the people watching. So while we're all walking around a smart city, if it's filled with sensors, cameras, and drones tracking our movements, even sensors checking whether we're smiling or not, they've already tested this one out at the Cheltenham Jazz Festival in England, there is a ticking time bomb of arguments about surveillance and privacy that's going to dwarf anything we've heard yet about what the NSA does to our emails. The smart city might become a place like Rio on steroids, where you can never disappear. If you have a mobile phone and the right sensors are deployed across the city, people have demonstrated the ability to track those individual phones. That's a quote from Justin Lyon, Simudyne. It's a very interesting American company that do simulations to help hospital evacuations, that kind of thing. And when I was talking to Lyon, he said, you know, you could get that data, and there's nothing that would prevent you from visualizing that movement in a SimCity-like landscape or in a Watchdog-style landscape on your screen. So you'd be able to see an avatar moving through the city and calling up their social media profile. And it's very easy to see. He says, oh, that's where they live, that's where they work, that's where their mistress must be, that's where they go to drink a lot. And he's saying, you know, it's possible to do that on real people, not on non-playable characters in a video game. And this kind of thing is also an issue with open data initiatives. Open data sounds cool. In my country, there are some cool things being done with it in Bristol and Manchester and London. Publicly available data about city parking, city procurement, planning, public toilets, fire service. This is good because, you know, we, the citizens, ought to own the data and have access to it. But the problem is, how safe is open data? It's been demonstrated by one blogger who did this brilliant thing in England. He took all the open available data from the London cycle hire scheme and showed that using just that open data, you can track individual cyclists and see where they're going. So it all becomes a bit Big Brother if this data is open to malefactors as well as people only interested in the public good. Here's Rem Koolhaas. He asks, why do smart cities offer only improvement? Where is the possibility of transgression? And I think that's a very good question. The problem is, in the age of the technological optimization of the urban machine, this dream of a smart city, the danger is that we lose the romantic notion of getting lost in the city, or the specifically French notion of the dérive, the unplanned diversion. And the person who does the dérive is, of course, the flaneur. He walks about the city with no specific destination in mind in order to be open to the serendipity of happenstance. Well, the smarter a city is, the more difficult it might be to get lost in it. And the flaneur willy-nilly will become a quantified flaneur, tracked and measured at every step. Even if he is lost, the people watching will always know where he is. Another problem for the flaneur is that if a city is too predictable and too legible, in a way too usable, paradoxically it might become fundamentally unknowable, because we'll just be skimming the surface of all the metadata that's overlaid on the real environment. At least that's how I read this story from Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. And it's about the city of Tamara. I'll just read you out a quote. This is Marco Polo talking about the city of Tamara. Finally, the journey leads to the city of Tamara. You penetrate it along streets thick with signboards jutting from the walls. The eye does not see things, but images of things that mean other things. Pincers point out the tooth drawer's house, a tankard the tavern, halberds the barracks, scales the grocer's. Statues and shields depict lions, dolphins, towers, stars. A sign that something, who knows what, has as its sign a lion or a dolphin or a tower or a star. Other signals warn of what is forbidden in a given place: to enter the alley with wagons, to urinate behind the kiosk, to fish with your pole from the bridge, and what is allowed: watering zebras, playing bowls, burning relatives' corpses. Your gaze scans the streets as if they were written pages. The city says everything you must think, makes you repeat her discourse. And while you believe you are visiting Tamara, you are only recording the names with which she defines herself and all her parts. However the city may really be, beneath this thick coating of signs, whatever it may conceal or conceal, you leave tomorrow without having discovered it. But if it's a smart city, tomorrow will definitely have discovered you along the way. In the end, the smart city will destroy democracy, says Leo Hollis. Like Google, they'll have enough data not to have to ask you what you want. And when you go to conferences about, about smart cities and you hear people who are enthusiastic about this stuff, you do hear an assumption that the smart city means that basically politics as we know it is over. I saw a guy at this summit in Docklands last year. He said, internet eats everything, and internet will eat government. And he said this as though it were a good thing because government is inefficient and it's not sufficiently computerized. Well, I hope internet doesn't eat government for the reasons I've given, because these are not solely technological problems, they're often political and moral problems as well. My point is not that computerization and networking don't make our lives better, they can and do, but these systems are being put in place without much in the way of public consultation, and the political implications are so big that we essentially need to renegotiate the social contract between the metropolis and the citizen. Otherwise, we'll be sleepwalking into a society of total surveillance. The question is whether all this technology in the smart city is going to be built to help the ordinary citizen or to track him down. And just as a warning, I'd just like to point out that the spaces that currently actually exist, which best conform to this ideal of the smart city as a space of perfectly frictionless efficiency and productivity, are Amazon warehouses in which the employees are tracked and monitored by the second in everything we do, and they're just fantastically well-oiled machines. So we need to ask, do we want the smart city to become a giant Amazon warehouse city? Or is the best place to live, for most of us, going to be a city that in some important ways remains a dumb city? That's it, thank you.